Hello again, everybody. Dr. Yates here with you. Thank you for joining me. We're going to continue our discussion of Homer's The Odyssey by focusing on the major themes of the Odyssey in this video. I want to go through each one and just kind of describe it, give you an idea of what to look for. And then I want to talk about Odysseus as a Homeric hero, and then we'll wrap it up. All right, so let's go through and look at just some of the major themes, and there are minor themes as well throughout the Odyssey, but I think these major ideas really give substance and shape to not just the story, but the actual characters and the overall big picture of what the Odyssey is all about. Okay, so the first major theme that I want us to look at is the theme of Nostos. We found this in the Iliad as well, but I think it's much more prominent here in the Odyssey. Nostos is a Greek term which means homecoming or return. And of course, this connects centrally to the hero's journey, to Joseph Campbell's monomyth concept. And it's really what fuels everything that happens in this poem, in the narrative of this poem, because the main character, Odysseus, has one goal, and that goal is to get home, to get back to his wife and son. So Nostos is all about homecoming, returning, etc. Odysseus wants to return home from Troy, and he has to do this by sea, of course. In ancient Greek society, it was seen as a very supreme level of heroism or level of greatness to be someone who went away to a war, for example, endured the war and came home. They managed to return. And so these individuals were always looked upon with not just great esteem, but almost a sense of exaltedness. Now, the journey that Odysseus is on, and really any other mythic hero, especially in Greek literature, undergoes this journey. The journey is typically long and extensive. The occurrence of shipwrecks occur frequently, new unknown locations, trials, all of these occur to test the hero on his homeward journey. And it's not just a physical return. It's not about returning home physically, but it also focuses on aspects of the hero's personality and identity, as well as status, so that by returning home, the hero has achieved a new level of knowledge and experience and wisdom, but also has attained a new kind of status among his people. So Nostos is the first major theme that we find here, and really it's from this theme that so much of the other themes connect. The next theme, which is close to Nostos, very closely allied or aligned with Nostos, is the theme of wandering. Really, when you look at the exploits of Odysseus, you'll find that only 2 of his adventures are described by a third-person narrator. Okay. The rest of his exploits, the things that he's gone through and triumphed over, are all told to us in the first person by Odysseus himself. So he's relaying his experiences. This is what happened to him. And so it's going to be marked by how he thinks and how he views things, what he believes, etc. Now, the 2 scenes that are described by a narrator are Odysseus on Calypso's island, and then Odysseus's encounter with the Phaeacians. And if you remember when we talked about structure, that's the first half of the narrative, those 2 things. Plus, Telemachus learning that his father is still alive. So once Odysseus reaches the Phaeacians, that's when he takes over, really, as the narrator for the rest of the Odyssey. Now, these 2 scenes are told by, for lack of a better way of looking at it, the poet, or Homer, to represent a very significant transition about or within Odysseus's journey. And that transition is all about being concealed in returning home. In other words, returning home in disguise. And so that's why it's set up that way, so that Odysseus can then take center stage and we understand what his point of view is and why he's doing certain things the way he's doing them and why he's done them the way he's done them. Okay. So wandering, going from one exploit to another, is a major theme. Okay. A third theme is the concept of xenia. And this is a very central concept in Greek society and Greek culture. Xenia is basically hospitality, how you treat people who arrive at your doorstep. It's dealing with friendship. It's how you treat guests. You might even call it, a very ritualized friendship. It's all about how you welcome someone and how you entertain someone during their stay at your home. But it's hospitality, and it's really rooted in the notions of generosity, reciprocity, in other words, giving and receiving, the exchange of gifts. All of these are rooted and swirl around this notion of hospitality. And hospitality is rooted in the home. And so the home plays a major focus and role in Greek society. And here in the Odyssey, where is Odysseus trying to get back to? He's trying to get back home. And so we see the 100 suitors in the lens, or through the lens, of Xenia. How they haven't been hospitable, they haven't been generous. They've basically taken over his palace, and they're all vying for the hand of his queen. And they've caroused, they've trashed the place, basically. So they've gone against this very sacred, almost, concept of hospitality. Now, on the flip side of that, we also see how Odysseus has been treated at different times when he's arrived or visited on someone's doorstep or in some foreign land. Probably the biggest is the Phaeacians, and how the Phaeacians welcome Odysseus and treat him while he's on their island. But even if you look at the episode with the Cyclops, that carries with it a degree of hospitality. Even though the Cyclops is wanting to eat Odysseus and his crew, they're still seen as in a way guests in his cave. And to escape, they have to go against this idea of Xenia to a degree to survive. But it's still an element that's there. So, historically speaking, in terms of Greek culture, hospitality towards guests and especially towards foreigners took the level of a moral obligation on the part of Greeks. So it's a central theme of the Odyssey, and it plays a central role in Greek culture. Okay. Another element that you see that gets treated fairly prominently in the Odyssey is the theme of testing, okay, of being put to a test. And in the Odyssey especially, testing happens in two really specific ways throughout. Odysseus either tests the loyalty of others. He puts other people to the test to determine what they're all about and what their loyalty is, etc. But also, other people test Odysseus's identity, because remember, he's still traveling in disguise on his way home. Now that he's lost his ship, his men, etc., he's trying to get home, but he's having to do it incognito, unrecognized, and so there's usually a very specific kind of pattern, and it's usually a very specific type of scene that manifests this idea of testing. As you're going through the Odyssey, you'll encounter those times when a test is being administered, and this is the background to it. Look for the pattern of testing and how it plays out. Omens are another major theme and element that we find throughout the Odyssey. And omens, like testing, usually occur in a specific kind of scene. Now, there are two important components to think of and to be aware of when we look at an omen or an omen type of a scene. Those two elements are the recognition of the omen, of recognizing that there is an omen that's taking place, but also an interpretation of the meaning of the omen. So in the Odyssey, we have a number of bird omens. And except for the very first one, all of these bird omens basically show or portray large birds attacking smaller birds. Okay. So if you've noticed in your reading, where do these birds come from? This is why they are symbols of omens, and they carry with them some kind of prophecy or foreshadowing for Odysseus. Now, with each omen, we have a wish that can be implied or it can just be stated. But there's always some kind of wish accompanying an omen. For example, Telemachus wishes for vengeance and wishes for his father to be home. Penelope wishes for Odysseus's return. The suitors wish for the death of Telemachus. They also wish for the hand of Penelope. So, connected to the omens that we find throughout the Odyssey, they're always accompanied or connected to some kind of wish on the part of a character or group of characters. Another major theme that plays out in the Odyssey is the theme of fidelity. Throughout his adventures, over 20 years, Odysseus remains faithful to Penelope. He's committed to her, even when a sea goddess offers herself to him and offers immortality even to Odysseus. He refrains from breaking his fidelity. Penelope also remains faithful and true to Odysseus. She refuses the offers of all the suitors, even though they're constantly at her doorstep and they're inhabiting, they've just moved into her palace. Even though Odysseus has been gone for a couple of decades. So fidelity becomes a really major thematic element throughout. One of the great scenes that really plays this out and pertains to fidelity is the scene with the sirens, where Odysseus has to be strapped to the mast of his ship, and he asks for wax to be plugged into his ears so he can't be seduced by the singing or the songs of the sirens. And his men, however, fall prey to that and are decimated. So a lot swirls around this particular notion of fidelity to one's mate, fidelity to one's status, fidelity in terms of honor. All of these kind of merge together into this particular theme. Now, those are the major themes. Now they all boil down to the idea of the Homeric hero. If you recall, in the Iliad, we talked about the Homeric hero and how the Homeric hero displays different kinds of arete, or different kinds of excellence, different strengths. But in the Iliad, we have one particular strain of Homeric hero, while in the Odyssey, we have a totally different strain of Homeric hero. In the Iliad, it was all about warfare and how one conducted oneself in order to be remembered and to attain glory and everlasting remembrance throughout the culture, the society. And so much emphasis is placed on how one acts and what one can do physically, such as battle and that kind of thing. Here, we still have some of that, but in this particular instance, more is done in terms of mental challenges and emotional challenges, not only physical challenges. So again, we have this Greek warrior society that has a huge importance placed on the idea of arete, which is striving for excellence in specific areas of behavior. Here in the Odyssey, the hero has left the battlefield. Okay, so he doesn't necessarily need arete or excellence or skill in terms of battle, but he still needs arete in courage and in determination, of being courageous, of being brave, and of being focused and determined on accomplishing his goal. But even more than that, it's arete of the mind that really comes to the forefront in the Odyssey. It's even more necessary and important, and so you get kind of a different emphasis placed on strength and skill than you do upon the strength and skills as a warrior. Here, strength and skill tends to be relegated to cleverness and to being creative and to outwitting one's opponent, not just fighting in battle and winning against an adversary in battle. So in terms of the Odyssey, Odysseus is wanting to basically survive and get home. That's his goal. That's what he's determined to do. So for him, we have a different idea of glory. It's not the achievement of glory in battle. It's not the rewards of honor and gold and things like that one typically gets in battle, as in the Iliad. Here, he prizes hearth and home above all else. Going home, being with his wife and being with his son are far more important to Odysseus than gold and glory and people praising or exalting him necessarily. Home and hearth are what really matter to Odysseus. And so with him, even though we have him as a Homeric hero, this gives us another aspect that makes up a Homeric hero. This gives us another way of looking at the Homeric hero, not just martial skill or battle skill. Now, another element that bounces off that idea and another role that really takes a thematic center in the meaning of this narrative is the role that Odysseus's non-human enemies play throughout these adventures. And again, that ties back to this aspect of the Homeric hero. Again, in the Iliad, everything is so much is so emphasized in terms of war and battle, but here in the Odyssey, it's more focused on just outright survival and determination. So during his journey, Odysseus has to overcome a number of obstacles and opponents that he wouldn't have had to face on a battlefield. Okay, he faces in his travels the gods, the wrath of gods. He faces monsters. He faces beasts, and all of these non-human opponents represent not just the obstacles, but the ideas of bad luck or fate that humans have to deal with every day on their journey through life. Okay? So we're getting a very metaphorical depiction throughout the Odyssey of what Odysseus's enemies are doing, but they're really metaphors and they're symbolic of what we as human beings have to overcome and have to face day in and day out. Now, the most prominent, Poseidon, of course, the god of the seas. I've mentioned the Cyclops, the Lastrygonians. They figure prominently. The monsters Scylla and Charybdis, the sorceress Circe and Calypso. All of these non-human opponents represent things outside a human's life that impact him or her, that must be dealt with and must be overcome. So the role of those non-human enemies is to give hope to the individual that these kinds of things can be overcome and can be, if not destroyed, at least can be overcome. Now that leads into another thematic area. The attitude that Greeks especially have toward the afterlife. And there's a major scene or sequence in the Odyssey where Odysseus has to travel to the underworld, has to descend to the land of the dead. And so what the attitude toward the afterlife is for Greeks is that it's more of not an afterthought by any means, but the afterlife is something that's in the background. What the human characters in the Odyssey are dealing with is the here and now, the present moment. That's more of a concern than the afterlife. Because, the Greeks basically believed in the afterlife, and that the dead and the land of the dead is basically a dark place and a dismal place. So they know they're going there, so what matters most is how they conduct themselves in the here and now, in the day by day. So as a result of that, their main purpose throughout life is to achieve immediate recognition, immediate rewards. In other words, they're more focused on living for the moment rather than planning out for the future. The idea of a heaven is less important than the things that can be done right now, or the things that can be experienced right now. In other words, this notion of a heavenly reward isn't as important to the Greeks as it becomes for other cultures. What matters to the Greeks most is doing good deeds whether they're on the battlefield or they're off the battlefield, and how they will be remembered. Not if they achieve some kind of recognition or eternal reward in Valhalla or in heaven, or pearly gates or golden streets of heaven. That's not as much of a factor to them, because for them, death is ultimately about darkness. But what is important is how they conduct themselves on a day-by-day basis in the here and now. But in spite of that, they still, in general, tend to revere the gods of Olympus, because the gods, like humans, take sides. And they often create sides when it comes to human conflict. It's always better not to offend a god, because offending one of the gods of Olympus could bring their wrath upon you, and that will affect the outcome of whatever struggle you're having or going through, whatever kind of conflict you're experiencing. So again, it's more of a sense of here and now rather than after I die, as being the significance of life or the meaning of life. Okay. So to wrap all of this up, what this boils down to is that Odysseus, as a Homeric hero, and as a protagonist, and as a character in the Odyssey, becomes a metaphor, you might say, for the idea of the universal individual, the universal man. Although, Odysseus has these great qualities. He's got wisdom, he's brave, he's a leader, he's clever and can be crafty, he's loyal, he perseveres, and he's determined, and he has endurance. He's still a human being. Okay, he's very human. He's not a godlike character. He's a family man. His main goal, the main point of his life, is to live out his remaining years in peace and in contentment of an ordinary family life. That's what his goal is. Remember when Achilles was so offended because his honor had been besmirched by Agamemnon? Here, that in the Odyssey, that doesn't matter to Odysseus. Odysseus is the universal man. He wins great fame on the battlefield as a very courageous, skillful, and wily warrior. He goes to sea, he sees the world, he goes to unknown lands, he has these extraordinary adventures. But what's most important to him, what's at his core, is a very human desire to simply be home and be with one's family. He prizes hearth and home above everything else. And that's what makes Odysseus, in my opinion, a much better protagonist and a more important protagonist than Achilles. Achilles was all wrapped up in himself and in the warrior mentality and achieving fame and glory. But Odysseus is all about the people he cares about. He cares most about his wife and his son. That's his goal. That's what he wants to be remembered for. So, all right. Probably got a little long-winded. I apologize for that. But I hope that this has been helpful to you. And we will see you next time. Thank you again for joining me. So long.